In this video, we're going to look at SQL queries with the exists keyword. So I'm on the W3 school site. I'm on their SQL exists.asp page. And then then I hit try it for yourself. And here's their example. So we are looking for suppliers who have products that are less than $20, we'll say. Okay, so it's select supplier name. We're looking for the names of suppliers from suppliers. And then we say where, and then we say exist. This keyword exists. And then we have a subquery. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as we get moving on. But then in the subquery, this says select product name from products where product.supplier ID equals supplier.supplier ID and the price is less than 20. And this produced over here, we see that there are 29 suppliers, but this produced 24 of them. So there were some suppliers that had no products less than 20. Okay. And uh, and then I just have just some variations on this to explain some things. So the exists is going to be sort of a true false. Either something exists, either there are products by that supplier less than 20 or there are not. And so it doesn't really matter the field. So in their example, they said product name, but what you will see if you look around is often just like one. Like it doesn't matter what you pick something, just even pick the number one, and it will produce the same results because it doesn't matter what you're getting out of the subquery. It matters whether the subquery gives results or not. Okay. What else? You can throw in the keyword not and find the supplier names of people who do not have products less than 20. Um, and so there were the other five. So that's just a convenient thing to do with if you're going to work with exists, to also work with not exists. Now, I find exists a little bit confusing here, um, because it works with a subquery um, that is not a standalone query on its own. So that's what makes this confusing. So you see there's this subquery and says, it just sort of says, are there suppliers with products less than 20? And then you say yes, and then why doesn't this then give me all the suppliers? And what you have to realize is that this subquery, the the supplier ID, the suppliers and the supplier ID in the subquery is the same suppliers as in the outer query. So there's no select something. Let's go back to theirs. Select product name from products. It's not products. We're not joining it on supplier ID. In the subquery, the from is only one table products. And then when we mention the other table suppliers, does not exist on its own in the subquery. So it comes from the sort of the outer query. And so then this inner query is sort of done for each sort of row, each record in the suppliers. So it's not this subquery, it's not a once and done thing. It's not a standalone query. So in one of these many tabs, here I have that. Here is the subquery, and it doesn't work. It's not a proper query on its own, the subquery, because it needs the suppliers table, and the suppliers table is not here. It's sort of being sort of, I don't know, sneaked in from the outer query. Okay, and that's the only way it makes sense. It wouldn't make sense to just figure out for all suppliers, do any of them have products less than 20, and then just grab all supplier names. That wouldn't make sense. So, but there's confusion. I find exists confusing, and I think I've seen some other people on the internet finding exists confusing. It's because this query is not sort of, you don't do, you see parentheses, you think you do that first and it's done, and then you go and you do the rest. And that is not the case because suppliers as a table does not exist within the subquery. So it's got to become from the outer part of the query. Okay. So now I just want to show that we can do, at least for this result, for this example of the exists query, we can do it another way with an in, and uh, and the in will also have a subquery, but in this case, it's sort of like, I don't know, I'll call it a proper subquery in that it is can exist as a standalone query. All right, so again, we want suppliers who have products that are under $20. So a product, I usually keep this last tab just to look at the tables. The products has a supplier ID. So I am in the subquery. I am querying products. I'm asking for prices less than 20, and what I'm pulling out is the supplier ID from that table. And then, so I have a list of supplier IDs of suppliers who have products less than 20. And then I am in the outer query finding the names of those suppliers that have a supplier ID in that set. So I make my subquery makes a set of supplier IDs, and then I'm looking for supplier names whose supplier ID falls within that set. So that's not an exist query, but that's the equivalent of this example, exist query. And then I just want to do, I always like to do one other example other than their provided example. And so I am finding the name. So in orders, we employees take orders. So the order 10248 was taken by employee 5. Okay, so now I want to see sort of how how much work my employees are doing or something like that. So I want to know who has taken a number of orders. I'm going to do it with an exists because that's what I'm demoing. I could probably do it with an in, um, maybe with an inner join. Okay, but now here's my subquery, and remember that I'm sneaking in employees at some point. I'm saying select one. It doesn't matter what I select because I'm using an exist. I'm going from orders, and I'm sneaking in employees from the sort of outer query. And I'm asking for the orders employee ID to be the employee's employee ID. I'm grouping by the employee's ID, and I'm counting up the orders. So I'm doing an aggregate query. Um, and you see the aggregation only in the having. Remember when you have an aggregate query with group by, then you replace where with having. And so this is a weird query because I'm selecting the just saying one. It doesn't matter what I get, but I am doing an aggregate query. I'm looking at employees and orders. I'm counting the order IDs, grouping it by employee IDs, and I'm looking for the count of orders to be greater than 25. Which of my employees have taken more than 25 orders? And then let me get their last name. And so that's just an example of an exists. Does it for each employee, does it exist that they've taken uh, more than 25 orders? If it exists, then give me their last name. And if I want the others, so of my employees, I have 10 employees, four of them uh, have are here. If I want the other ones, I'll just switch it over to not exists, and that will give me the other six. Now, if I were looking for less than, if I were trying to get my employees who had counts, say, less than 10 or something like that, I'd have to be a little bit more careful because I'm effectively doing an inner join here on employees and orders. And I might miss, if I did this as a less than rather than a greater than, I might miss the employee who has no orders. Um, I, I believe there, I forget, I think it's West. I think it's Adam West has taken no orders. Um, I'd have to be more careful. I can capture them with the not exists, but if I did this with an exists and a less than, I would miss the person who had no orders whatsoever. And maybe that's just not uh, the role of that employee. But anyway, so there we go. I wanted to show you this exists. It's got a works with a subquery. It is not a standalone subquery. So, and I worked through the supplied example by the W3 schools and another one. And I've shown, at least for this example, that you can do it sort of equivalently with an in instead of an exists. Which is more efficient? I have to be honest, I don't know. That's it for this one. Thanks for your attention.